no matter where you are or your station in life, you can give back. Something my mother always taught me.
Welcome to the Regeneration Will Be Funded. This is a show about regenerative finance. We are exploring pathways to a life-affirming economy. I'm your host, Matthew Monahan, and today's guest is Nicole Taylor. She is the president and CEO of Silicon Valley Community Foundation. Silicon Valley Community Foundation was actually my first introduction to this world of philanthropy. Just over 12 years ago, I became a client, a very happy client and partner of SVCF over many years.
Great.
Wonderful to bring this conversation to the audience. Thank you, Nicole, for sitting down with us.
Oh, thanks for having me here. Really, it's a pleasure and an honor.
And so you came into SVCF around 2018.
Yes, in December 2018.
Would love to hear a bit of your background and context.
Yeah. So I fell into philanthropy, in the work of philanthropy. I started my career as a teacher. My family's Jamaican, and as first gen American, all I knew was you become a doctor or a lawyer, because that's what it's kind of the old immigrant story. You become a doctor or lawyer, then you're successful. So I'm like, oh, I'll be a doctor. Then chemistry in college. I was like, Mom, I'm not going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a teacher. And she was worried because she said this country doesn't value its teachers. And so she was worried about me and my career and what that meant. But she said, just be the best you can be. And education was what moved us out of poverty. And so she knew that me just being in education was okay. And I saw stark contrasts. I did student teaching in Palo Alto, which is an affluent city. I had everything I needed. I taught science and I had all the equipment. My students had computers at home. And this was a time when that was an anomaly. Like not a lot of people had it. And then my first year teaching was in West Oakland, so about 30 miles away. And all my students lived in public housing. They locked up the lab equipment because they said the students didn't deserve it. They said they might break it. They said, how am I supposed to teach earth science? How am I supposed to teach life science when I have no equipment to show these kids? Our textbooks were outdated. To teach clouds and how atmosphere worked, I took them out onto the playground and have them lay down and try to identify the clouds in the sky, because I wanted to make it tangible and fun, because otherwise they're just sitting at their desks learning science, which can be boring if all you have is a textbook and some paper. So I was frustrated at the difference that just 30 miles had
stark
for life.
contrast.
Complete stark contrast. So I'm like, I'm going to be about changing systems so that this is not the reality for more kids. And went into an education nonprofit, and then did some school reform work in San Francisco. And that project didn't last very long. The funding got cut, and literally got hired by the man who was running then the East Bay Community Foundation based in Oakland. And he had been my funder at the nonprofit that I was working at prior. He said, come work for me. I want you to give out grants and work with donors. I was like, okay, what is that? And taught me the ropes, and really put mentors around me, and allowed me to grow in an incredible way. And I saw that this world of philanthropy, where people are really generous, needs to be part of the ecosystem of change. There's the people on the ground, on the front lines, which I was when I was teaching and when I was in the nonprofit that I was working in. We need them, but they need to be enabled to do the work they need to do. And there's public funding, which, depending on who's in office and policies, that can change. But without philanthropic capital, and sometimes we call it the risk capital, the work on the front lines can be really hampered. And so I was excited about that. And so I got the bug and I stayed in philanthropy for a while. I've also spent my career in philanthropy and also in higher education. There are times when I would get disillusioned with philanthropy.
Happens to all of us.
Happens, right? Just because you have the resources may not mean that you actually know the solutions, particularly if you're not in contact with the people that you're trying to serve or the communities you're trying to serve. And so I spent some time at Stanford as an administrator and Arizona State University as an administrator, thinking that, back in education, and probably we would still be in it had I not gotten the call to come to Silicon Valley, back to Silicon Valley, I should say, and help it at a time when it really needed help. The foundation, it was, as you know, went through a rough patch, and a lot of parts of my career have been about either turning something around or taking it to scale or taking it to the next level. And so this was a challenge that I was willing to jump back into philanthropy in a region that I knew really well. And a lot of the relationships I had. And so here I am almost 6 years later. So
and it feels like you've installed a lot of amazing executive team, leadership team, built better systems, operational processes,
all of that. And it was a complete team effort. Real changeover in the executive team, and have some phenomenal people who are change agents themselves and could be working in the private sector easily, could be doing many other things, but recognize that if a community doesn't have an intermediary like a community foundation, which gathers resources, gets them deployed, and does so effectively, efficiently, that community can really suffer. That community can have less to work with, and they are passionate and really, really smart. So we've all rolled up our sleeves to, we've completely transformed our technology, the entire stack, and really thought differently about how we work with donors, and how we can be of service and meet donors where they're at, help you be effective as a donor. And also sometimes we bring ideas about, you're really interested in this. Maybe you should think about this organization or this aspect of the work. Maybe you should organize the way you're doing the work a little differently, so you can get more out or be more efficient with the resources you have. And we are always accountable to community. That's at the center of what we do, is to change.
I really want to pull on a lot of those different threads. So that was a great introduction. For people who may not know about Silicon Valley Community Foundation, kind of how would you place it within the ecosystem, and maybe a bit of summation around the size and the scope?
So there are about 800 community foundations around the country, and Canada has a number of community foundations. There's some in Europe, some in Mexico. We operate as community catalysts and conveners of resources. And we usually there's two aspects of it. We usually have our own endowment that's flexible and allows us to do things locally that we need to do. And then we have donor advice funds. Every community foundation reflects the community, both on the community side and the donor side. So we are the largest in the world, community foundations, and one of the largest foundations, period, in the world. People are like, wow. I'm like, but I'm sitting in Silicon Valley. So if that wasn't true, we wouldn't be doing something right. Like, we are activating the assets that are in that valley. So currently we're about 14 billion in assets, and our donors typically give 2 billion out a year. Last year they gave 4.6 billion out. So they are granting at a pace that is incredible. My staff said that last year, the only foundation that gave out more than us was the Gates Foundation. So our donors, whether they have hundreds of millions of dollars with us or $25,000 with us, everyone is giving. And we encourage them to engage where they're at. Like I said, to be effective. What do they need? How can we support them? We provide the staffing to support that. We also are doing more of what I like to call donor salons around issue areas, where we bring a group of donors together who are interested in a particular topic. So we did one on journalism recently. We had 20 donors come. We put a call out to those that we think would be interested. 20 showed up and kind of doubled down on the importance of news, real news, truth, and what that means in local communities.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just an example. We did one on mental health, and particularly youth mental health, and coming out of the pandemic, what's happening with our young people.
Mm-hmm.
And that one, we had about 60 to 70 donors show up and want to know what do we do?
Yeah.
How can we do it? And so that's a role that we feel we can play, particularly with folks with donor advised funds, to not just help them do what they want to do, but open the aperture, if you will,
Yeah.
of what they think is possible and what's out there.
Yeah. We've covered a number of conversations in this series about donor advised funds. And the reason is basically that it's the fastest growing segment of philanthropy. Assets in the donor advised fund space have ballooned in the last decade. And so, how do we get all those funds to the projects that need it? And as you know, our interest is very much in the climate, environmental space. But Silicon Valley Community Foundation is unique in that you have that donor advised fund component, but you're a community foundation. And I just really want to make sure that people get that explicit point. What's different about that? And what does it mean in terms of, like your mandate, your responsibilities and accountability? And is there anything even structurally different about that?
Yeah. So several things are different than other DAF sponsors. So one, the fees that we charge on each individual fund, that actually goes to our community work. That allows us to do work in our local communities. It's a very different structure than other.
Doesn't go to shareholders.
No, none of that. So that's really important. And many donors like the idea that, our fee may be higher, but they're getting staff that assist them, and they know their fees are going to good. And so that's one important thing. The other important thing is we create the communities, these kind of micro communities, if you will, when we do these donor salons. We just had an annual meeting and 500 people showed up, and that was community leaders, donors. We serve 60 to 65 companies with their corporate social responsibility. They showed up. We had elected officials all together. So when you're working with a community foundation, you are actually part of a broader community, all focused on ensuring that the community you live in, work in, made your money in, raising your family in, is thriving. So that's different. The other is we don't just let you sit on your assets. And there's data out there that most donors don't sit on their assets. They're actually pushing it out to the tune of about 20% a year. Last year we saw over 40, it was close to 44% that our donors gave out in terms of their donor advised funds. If you don't make a grant or have any movement in your fund for 2 years, we tell you we're going to take it and then we give it out. So there's no unused money. We contact you and say, hey, you haven't given a grant. We contact you actually after a year. Didn't make a grant this year. Remember after year 2, we're happy to use it. Communities need it. It's going to go to good. And some people are, it's interesting because, that was my dad's fund. We didn't even realize it. He passed away. You guys do what you need to do. Or, okay, we'll start giving. So we make sure that nothing sits on the sidelines. So,
and the 20% is specific to SVCF staffs.
It's actually the National Philanthropic Trust puts out a report every year that talks about the difference in payouts, private foundations, public foundations, donor advised funds. Every year, it's about 20% for any DAF sponsor. Generally. Ours is no different, and we've seen no different. And that payout is all in grant dollars. So private foundations, they have a 5% payout requirement, which is actually a minimum. They can include administrative costs in that 5%. So it's not all 5% that goes out to community organizations or NGOs.
So if I have a foundation and I have $1 million under management, I have to give out 50,000, but I can include my staff in that 50,000.
And your staff could include family that you're paying.
And so I could be employing my brother as a private foundation. And then I'm still, qualifying for all the rules. And then the $950,000 in my endowment is really just being invested.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing that we've been able to do is allow donors to use their donor advised funds for impact investing. Things that like recoverable grants or investing in B Corps or other kind of companies that are doing social good and provide a return that then gets recycled back into additional things. So we see that with housing, for instance, and low income housing, which is very hard to pencil out for developers. Nonprofit developers have a lot of problems getting bank loans and just to start the projects. We need housing desperately. So we have donors who are like, we'll back that. We will give that first money in so that then they can leverage other dollars to get the housing built that we need. And so that's been really interesting. So people can we're trying to get people to use more of our balance sheet, if you will.
And is that the same as what you mentioned, recoverable grants, or what is that?
So recoverable grant may be, sometimes it's for housing. It may be for a solution around any issue, childcare. So childcare center needs more space, needs to hire and scale up. We need people whose kids can be cared for so they can work. There's no way they're going to get capital from the bank. It's just one of those unbankable kind of businesses. And so if you give them, you can give the many are nonprofits, the organization a grant, and you can say, okay, this will help you scale up. And then if this were a loan, you'd pay us back with no interest. And almost always they pay us back and allow us to put that money back to use. So donors like that. And particularly in Silicon Valley, they like the idea of doing some kind of return that then gets cycled back and for good. They never want it it goes back into their donor advised fund and then they get to, recycle those dollars, and they always want to keep it moving. So it's a really interesting aspect of philanthropy that we have the flexibility in doing.
Totally. I mean, to me, that was what was always enticing about the space is that we have so much philanthropic capital, around the world, like trillions. And then, what I learned is just like how much of that is actually just invested. Yeah. So I guess the premise of philanthropy is that your money can make a difference. And so if that's true, then what we invest in also makes a difference.
Absolutely.
And if 95%, whatever of the dollars are being invested, then, we need to critically examine, like, what is the impact of those investments? And if they're mostly just, typical stocks, typical government bonds, then like, aren't we just reinforcing economy as usual? And so this space of impact investment, recoverable grants, low interest loans, blended finance, like it's actually a huge amount of capital that can be doing much more good.
Oh, absolutely. And, you care about climate and environmental issues, and think about all the organizations that are out there that may have some solutions and need the funding, but don't just need the one-time grant. And donors may or may not have the ability to give the same level year after year. If you could finance it in a way, like social financing, right? If you could finance it in a way that allows them to get off the ground, proof the concept, and then get that solution out there and out on the market. I mean, right? That, to me, again, is the risk capital that philanthropy should be providing. One of the other things we do with our assets, we've also given the mandate to the folks who manage our assets that we want to also invest in minority and women-owned firms because we don't want to perpetuate what has been the typical investment advisory firm. And many people are like, oh, but you're going to sacrifice returns. I'm like, that's interesting that that's your first statement after we say that. No, many are beating, benchmarks. So most are beating benchmarks. So we also consider like even doing that is also making a statement about the kind of change we need to see in the world.
So you mentioned the housing as kind of a focus area, this kind of how you select fund managers. What are some of the other, I guess, priorities areas or strategic imperatives? So I mentioned childcare. So early childhood is really critical.
And both early childhood and housing is related to kind of this underlying theme of economic mobility
Mm.
and economic stability. So Silicon Valley, the most inequitable place in the country.
Mhm.
You have extreme wealth and extreme poverty. If you drive through Silicon Valley, you're going to see RVs parked along the street.
Mhm.
And many people think the, single guy living in that RV, his fault. Why can't he just get somewhere to live or
Mm.
work? Most of the people living in their RVs are families and working families.
Mm.
The service industry that helps make Silicon Valley work can't afford to live there. And that includes teachers, police officers, firefighters, wait staff at restaurants, people in stores, the things that make communities
Mhm.
can't afford to live there. It is an incredibly inequitable place. People drive 2 to 3 hours to come do an hourly wage job
Mhm.
because that's the reality. So that's why early childhood and childcare is important.
Mm.
If you don't have someone take care of your kids, you can't go and work, and the onus usually falls on the mother. So then, right, then you have potentially a woman out of the workforce, not earning, not living her potential, all related to what does that mean for the family?
Mm.
So when we talk about economic mobility, we talk about things like guaranteed income. We did it during the pandemic. We saw that child poverty decreased. People didn't spend free money
Mm.
on drugs, alcohol, bad things. They actually put food on the table. They put
Mhm.
gas in the car for that 2 to 3 hour commute because they were essential workers. They didn't get to work from home like the rest of us did.
Mm.
So we've funded pilots and then research that show, okay, what would this look like at scale?
Yep.
We've, really thinking about job creation, job training. What do the jobs of the future look like? And who are we training for the jobs of the future?
Mm.
So those are the issues that we really double down on. We also recognize as a community foundation, we have to be responsive to the needs of the community. So we do smaller grants to environmental issues, health issues, arts. We have a whole faith in neighborhoods area
Mm.
because the community said we, we need those kind of community organizations for our neighborhoods to be vibrant.
Mm.
So we do listen to community leaders.
Mm.
One of the things that a community foundation leader, being a leader of one, is always, it's like daily. I am held accountable when I go to the grocery store.
Mm.
I'm held accountable when I go to any store in my community. People come up to me. I have this organization. I really need help. Can I talk to you or a staff member? Or I'll run into a donor who's like, Nicole, I have this idea for something. Can you help me? And that is part of what it means to be a community-based philanthropy.
Mhm.
I tell these stories to my colleagues who run private foundations and like, people recognize you in the grocery store? I'm like, every time I go in.
Mm.
They said, that's what this job is, which is what
Mm.
I love. I feel like we are embedded in it. And it was one of my mandates coming in or 5.5 years ago is to put the community back into the community foundation and be of and for the community, whether that community member was a donor or that community member was one of those service workers who's really struggling to get by.
Mm.
So it's a really meaningful and fulfilling part of the sector.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And there's so much need. And as you
Yeah.
mentioned, I mean, Silicon Valley has obviously this huge disparities. And having lived there, for the better part of a decade
Yeah.
before I moved to New Zealand, I definitely had that experience of feeling like in some ways this is like so exciting. The future is being built here.
Yes.
In other ways, this isn't actually the future that I want to see.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
One of my frustrations always was not enough being done around environment and climate.
Right.
And, up and down the court, whether it was in the venture space, in the tech space, in the philanthropy
Right,
space, in the
right.
government space, like I have long felt this sense of like, we're not recognizing the scale and the enormity of the challenges and the irreparable damage we're
Yeah.
doing to our habitat and our biosphere.
Yes.
and the myriad of things we could be doing to be more in service to this collective challenge, not only for ourselves, but also all the species on the planet and our kids and future generations. So yeah, I would love to hear how you're thinking about it. How do you think about it at the Community Foundation? And how do we get more capital from donors into environmental nonprofits?
Right? Yeah. So a few different ways. So one, our donors gave $125 million last year to environmental and climate efforts, which was great. My team will tell you I'm never satisfied. I'm like, that's great. Way not enough.
Because it's, I mean, that's consistent with the average, right? So if you did $4.5 billion in grants, that's,
and 125, right?
2 to 4%.
Exactly. So I'm like, we can do a lot better, Silicon Valley.
Yeah, especially since assets under management at 15 billion.
Right.
So we're
exactly. Right. We can do better. And so a couple different ways that we push things. So we're planning out our donor salons for next year. I'm like, well, guess which one needs to maybe show up a couple times.
Great.
And getting the word out, climate, and not just the problem, but the solutions, right? We have donors who give to global efforts, be it oceans or deforestation or people reclaiming lands, and they're indigenous leaders reclaiming their lands in the Amazon. So we have donors who are giving deep globally. And then we have donors who are actually focused on the climate change that's happening in the San Francisco Bay. And all the lying communities that surround the Bay happen to all be really low income communities. And so when we have torrential rains or, long lasting rains, guess who gets flooded out? Right. So we have a number of donors that are committed to that. And that's where our work comes into play, kind of the local impact of climate change, because it shows up every winter. And then we have fire season. Right? So then we have both of those things happening right in our backyard. So we have a number of donors who are really passionate about that. We have an environmental donor circle, and they go out. We take them on site visits. They go into these communities. They talk to the community leaders who are trying to lead the change in the neighborhoods. So those are some of the ways that we're really trying to make our difference in our local communities, and then exposing donors to think, there's national collaboratives around different issue areas when they want to do something at a bigger scale than just locally, that we assist with that as well.
Got it. And for a nonprofit, regardless of the space they work in, how do they get your attention to be like, how do they get their work featured at a salon or in front of donors? And this is a question I get asked a lot is like, hey, you're talking to these people who are stewarding funds. How do we get in front of them?
Right. Yes. So I have a team of folks who are on our community impact side, and that's their job, is to get to know the organizations, thousands of organizations in our area. So there's that. And through our smaller grants program, people apply. So then we actually see whether or not we can afford to fund all of them, which we never can. The need is always is greater than the resources we have, because our endowment's pretty small compared to our overall asset size. So that they get a good lay of the land of who's doing what. And then when we go bigger or bigger scale, whether it's throughout the state or country or beyond, a lot of times we will connect with the donors who are funding in those areas. And some donors have staff that we work with, or we'll talk to the donors directly. What are you investing? You've been investing in this organization. We have other donors who might be interested. So, so between our donor engagement team and our community impact team, there is no shortage of organizations that we vet and can present to our donors. And organizations find us. And we consider, again, it's like being in the grocery store and people come up to me, like that's part of the job. Like we've got to open our arms. We can't be the gatekeepers. We should be the gate openers. So,
and one question I get as well, and I know it's kind of challenging because there's so much need everywhere. And, every time I engage with your team, there's usually a recentering of the local community in
Yes.
the Bay Area.
Yes.
Like, here's the things happening. And,
Yes.
and I just so appreciate that, because that is the work.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, like, we live in New Zealand.
Right.
And so we're often engaging in nonprofits all over the world.
Yep.
And your team's always super supportive and helping us
Right.
with moving funds where we deem is our work. But I do get asked from like my New Zealand friends,
like, how do we
get that Silicon Valley money? Because the New Zealand nonprofit ecosystem is so tiny, and like there's so much more over there.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, yeah, it's tricky because obviously there's so much need everywhere. And yeah, what would you say to groups all over the world, someone who might stumble on this on the internet? Like, how do we get access to Silicon Valley capital?
So first, we start on the donor side, where it's not either or, right? It's both and. Give locally and give where you're at, you know, and what you were interested in wherever it is. So that's what we try to impress on people. And then one of the things that I try to do is so our network isn't just with community foundations, it's with private foundations and funders in the United States and people who fund all over the world. And we often share information and introductions to organizations that they may be funding or that we hear about. So that network is really important, because we don't have people anywhere on the continent in Africa on the ground, but I have, 3 to 5 good colleagues running major philanthropies that I can connect donors to, because I know they have people in country. So for folks who are, from other places, again, they can connect with us. And what we try to do is see if there's any donors that are interested in that issue area. So first, what's the issue area? And then see if there's a connection or somebody that would be interested.
Right.
I always tell folks, if I gave you $100,000 to give away and you had to do it charitably, would you know the issues you care about and how to spend it? And almost 9 times out of 10, people are like, well, of course. I'm like, do you even know the organizations you would fund? And I'm like, yeah, pretty much. He said, well, our donors are the same. So knowing that, they're no different than you, right? They're no different than any other person who has an idea of how they would spend that money charitably. So we have to, that's why the relationship building with our donors is so important.
Totally.
So that we can do the matchmaking. I'm like, okay, Matthew cares about this.
Yeah.
We've just heard about these 2 things happening. I don't know if it's on his radar or not. So we can bring it to you, right? And it would make sense because we know the portfolio of things you care about.
Yeah.
If I just randomly picked out something and came to you, you'd be like, Nicole, this is not where my interests are. I'm focused, we wouldn't be doing you a service or the organization.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's my general take as well when people ask about fundraising strategy. It's like, for better or worse, if you're playing the game as it currently is, like in philanthropy and grant making, it's about relationships.
Yes.
And, you really just want to be actively cultivating long-term relationships.
Exactly.
That's how you...
No, it is. Yeah. It is. And, another unique part of being at a community foundation is we consider ourselves the gate opener. So we have staff who will take meetings with nonprofits, whatever the issue area, because we know we have folks that are probably interested.
Right.
And we can bring them things they may or may not bite, but at least they're in the system now. And it's something that we can bring to other donors as well.
Yeah.
So we try. We try.
Yeah, no, it's I mean, the whole field itself is funny because we're still just a tiny portion of the global economy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not for profit.
Right.
Right. So these organizations, having been on that side, they start from a 0 budget every year.
Right.
Right. Just about.
Right.
And they're the ones doing some of the most incredible work. In this country, the nonprofits are carrying out a lot of what county governments do. They have contracts with county governments to provide the services in neighborhoods and communities. Right. They are doing vital services, yet we make them beg and borrow the capital they need to do what we need.
And especially within Silicon Valley, there is a little bit of that sense of judgment against nonprofits
Yeah.
or the nonprofit model.
Yes.
Not universally, but there is a
Oh,
sense
yeah.
of like, oh, it's maybe not
Not
as
professional enough.
effective, not
Yes.
professional enough. You never know if your money is getting used for good. Like
Right.
all these kinds of common, reframes. And how do you respond to that?
So
And
one, we vet the organizations that we fund, so we know what their balance sheet looks like, what their reserves look like, what their leadership looks like, and most nonprofits have highly intelligent, highly educated people working at them. Most of their boards are people who come from private sector as well as public sector and nonprofits. Most are actually doing great work. The inefficiencies come because they can't turn a profit, right? So they have to be asking for money constantly. That's really inefficient to get any work done. So a lot of that comes, there's not a lot of bloat because they can't afford it. So that's a misperception. And there are organizations in most major areas that actually do an assessment of, the state of the nonprofit sector.
Right.
So it's pretty reliable. And then whatever community foundations in your area, chances are they know the organizations that are being efficient, effective, and having impact. So that's what I usually say. I'm like, why don't you rely on the folks that we've vetted and the network that we have of nonprofits, because we know some amazing people and amazing organizations. So.
One thing you said to me that I thought was interesting, and I guess it's a common critique of the DAF model as well. You said the business model is broken.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So for community foundations in particular, our business model is over 100 years old. It was started by bankers in Cleveland, basically bankers and businessmen at that point in Cleveland. And they set it up like a bank. So like you had your charitable checking account, right? They had actually put unrestricted dollars into the community foundation. It was the community trust, because they knew that there needed to be some capital that went for good and that business couldn't take care of and government couldn't take care of. Fast forward several decades, the DAF model appears in a community foundation and it takes off, and they really do become like charitable checking accounts. And you charging fees like a bank would charge fees on your account. And that was fine. And then we had financial sector players start sponsoring DAFs.
Right.
Which actually democratized philanthropy more than even community foundations did, because usually wealthy people had DAFs. Wealthy people had private foundations. Your average person couldn't really aggregate capital and give out large amounts of money.
Yeah.
So it is really hard to beat a financial institution's fee price.
Yep.
And so if people are really concerned about fees, we're very transparent. We're more expensive than a financial institution's DAF product. So we have to show our value.
Yeah.
And people understand that the higher fee is for the value we bring. That only goes so far. So now we're trying to think about, okay, how do we sustain the work that people expect community foundations to do in their local community?
Yep.
How do we sustain the interest and the philanthropy of the donors, who we know many are fee sensitive, and keep this important work going? It's a big question mark for many of us in terms of, okay, how do we actually evolve this model? So there's many leaders in the community foundation space that are getting together and thinking about, how do we evolve this model where we can actually be the force for good that people demand and expect from us.
Yeah.
That's really hard to sustain and support financially.
Yeah.
Right. Just based on the fee model. And we don't want to hold on to the assets. We want the assets to go out. So, right. So that in and of itself, that fee model, it kind of goes counter to how we operate.
Yeah.
Right. If we just cared about the fees, we'd be not giving out, not encouraging donors to give. That's not who we are.
Right.
So it's kind of
it's a messy
it's
set
a
of
mess. It
incentives
is.
that's tricky.
It is.
You need the money to go out. You make the money on the assets under management.
Right.
You are taking the fees you're getting, investing in the relationship management,
Right.
but also back into the community.
Right.
But then you're competing with financial institutions
that are next to nothing.
because they're making their money on the back end of fund management.
Right.
And that would be my
Exactly.
key, feeling. I don't know if I fit the average profile or if this is, would actually work at scale, but I do personally, I'm not sitting there thinking about your fees versus all the other DAF fees as the determinant.
Right.
I think of it more as back to the opportunity is the capital that is under management until it goes out the door.
Right.
Where is that money going? And for me, it's like to be able to partner with DAFs where I can construct portfolios to ensure that there's an alignment of the endowment to the impact that we're trying to make.
Yes.
And the field is still nascent in really doing this well.
Yes.
There's either long liquidity lockups or lots of new funds with unproven track records or difficulty because of compliance reasons or different jurisdictions operate in different ways. And so just to say, I want to invest in, for example, we recently got involved with a lending to farms to transition to organics and regen ag.
Yeah.
And it's like a very straightforward model. It's still has some risk, but we got excited about it because we want to be part of that transition.
Yes.
We're willing to take on the 3 to 7 year kind of lockup period of that capital for a sub-market rate return, but not nothing.
Right.
And it's not a grant, but it's essentially to assist these farms in getting through that first 5 years of transitioning to organics and regen ag. To me, that's exciting. It's like, okay, and I can see that model emerging in forests for reforestation projects and for, a lot of different ecological initiatives.
Right.
And so I'm happy to pay a higher fee if I can work with DAF providers who can support all of the many different pipes and plumbing and infrastructure, because that was what brought me to DAFs in the first place. Was I was running a startup. I didn't have time to run my own foundation.
Exactly.
Right? So I went to SVCF. I'm like, well, how do we do this? And it's kind of like, well, click, click, click. Okay, now we have our own donor advised fund, which is like your own foundation.
Exactly. And then the other thing that I think we help with is the kind of assets that people, particularly in Silicon Valley, have. Right.
Exactly.
LP interest in venture funds. We take restricted stock. We know about the lockup. We know about, the window of opportunity, various kinds of cryptocurrencies.
Right.
That's, again, it's reflective of our community. Not all community foundations can do that, but not all community foundations have a donor base with the really unique assets that Silicon Valley has. And so we've become really good at being able to convert whatever those assets are into cash so it can go out and do the work that you need it to do. Whether it's an LP interest in a fund, whether it's restricted stock, what kind of cryptocurrency do you have? Let's figure out how to convert that so that it can be used for good.
Yeah. And that was really a big part of my journey. And I would say to any entrepreneurs and people who have stock in companies, working with Silicon Valley Community Foundation has been amazing.
Great. Thank you.
Huge shout out to Shanti, Liz, and the whole team. I think as someone who was new, I had a lot of questions trying to navigate, how does this work? How does that work? I wasn't getting those answers when I called up Fidelity. So there is, I think, a very practical, real value to what you're saying about investing in those relationship management functions, because there are just a lot of boutique needs and questions that people are going to have.
And answers beyond donor advice funds, as you know. There's a lot of other tools that we can bring to play depending on what your needs are and what you're trying to get done.
Yeah. Well, appreciate the work, Nicole.
Oh, thank you.
Are there any questions I didn't ask or topics you wanted to also touch on? Any final words you'd like to share?
Thank you. And thank you for this, but more importantly, thank you what you're trying to do every day. You and your brother. Your whole family, your whole team of folks. You are setting a model. You are inspiring not just to us, but to other people who are watching you guys and trying to see, well, how'd they
what
do
are those
it?
crazy kids
I know, what are they doing? And they moved to New Zealand. There's a farm there. And there's this podcast, video cast thing that they're doing. But you are getting the word out about what's possible. And that no matter where you are or your station in life, you can give back. something my mother always taught me. We had nothing.
Mm.
We had nothing. She came from Jamaica, 6th grade education equivalent, and she always just wanted to give and inspired me to give in whatever I was doing.
Mm.
And to see you and your brother and your family and all the people around you with that same ethos, with that same desire to give it really is amazing.
Mm.
And I just thank you. Really. Thank
Mm.
you.
Well, thank you, Nicole, for the kind words. And it also, I come from my mother was a school teacher, and she was the one that instilled in us the importance of giving.
Yeah.
And so we owe her a great debt of gratitude in
Yeah.
that respect. But
Yeah.
such a pleasure to be on the journey together.
Yes,
Thanks
absolutely.
for joining us in New York before I know you have a very tight, busy
I know.
schedule and flying home. But
Yeah.
for people who want to engage in SVCF, how do they find you and the work?
info@siliconvalleycf.org.
Great.
Easy.
Yeah. And for more great conversations like this one, just go to maearth.com. We'll continue to be publishing out interviews from here at New York Climate Week. So thanks for tuning in. I'll see you on the next one.